Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today's upload is absolutely mind-blowing. Before we jump into it, a couple quick links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click the like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment and share the video. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help this channel to continue to grow and go. They definitely do matter and are appreciated. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to today's upload, shall we? So 10 days ago, I had the privilege of chatting with a Catholic priest who had an experience back in 1985. He was 22 years old at the time, and he's now 61, so it was 39 years ago. He and his friend had decided to go to this location that they have gone to probably 1,000 times before. And he had an experience that really changed his course in life. He had reached out to me last night, sent me an email. I guess he had been trying to get in touch with my studio phone, which I turn off and I put in a Faraday bag every time I use it, or every time it's being used. I guess it's the best way I know how to keep my kind of burner phone secure. So I was unaware of him trying to get in touch with me. Well, I get the email and I call him up, and he says, I got some information that I'd like to talk to you about. And I had talked to one of my parishioners that I was going to speak to. He had told me that he wanted to talk to a parishioner of his before sharing a little bit of what he knows happened to this gentleman. And I was more than happy to wait. So his experience happened in the area of the Cheyenne Mountain. It was a NORAD station at the time. Now it's a Space Force station. And they had hiked in from this region called the Horns. They had kind of gotten their old kind of 1980s chairs with the nylon slats in it. And they were just drinking some beers and smoking some weed, just chilling out, This was, once again, before he even chose to become a priest. So they're hanging out, and a few of his friends had a couple Bigfoot experiences, this and that. But what ended up happening is there was this kind of very strange phenomena that happened. And he looked over at his friend, and his friend was completely stationary, almost like frozen. At one point, he's outside. The next minute, he's in this very large room. And he has no idea how or what happened. He was 1 minute sitting in this like $10 chair to now sitting on a metal kind of examination table. His experience is in the content. You can find it and listen to it. I'm not really going to rehash the whole thing. But what ended up happening to him that day or that evening led him to go to seminary school and become a priest 2 years later. He's 61 years old now, and still to this day a knower. Not a believer, he is a knower. He has seen things that most people haven't, and he had heard the experience that I talked and shared with you guys, a kid named Kirk, and he had his experience on Mount Shasta. And there are two similarities here. One is Kurt had gone to sleep in his tent and woke up on a metal examination table, was escorted down this hall, and he saw everything from Dogman to Bigfoot to creatures like the Crawler to two Nephilim chained to this very strange angelic creature that was chained in the shape of a crucifix. Now, similarities is what this gentleman saw, and once again, go and listen to it. I'm not going to rehash it because it's fairly new. But he really felt like he needed to talk more about what happened to him after his experiences and what another parishioner of his had. He wanted to ask and make sure that it was okay to share it. And he, obviously it was 10 days ago, so he had to wait until, to be quite honest, he waited until Saturday to where he could talk to him during confession. So he believes wholeheartedly that the creatures that people are seeing, these Nephilim mountain giants, whatever you want to call them, are remnants of the original Nephilim, the ones that were supposed to be drowned from the Great Deluge. While Noah was on the ark and such, these creatures were supposed to be washed away and drowned by this huge flood. He believes wholeheartedly that some survived. And that was part of God's plan. And I asked him, I said, well, why do you think it was part of God's plan? And he said, one, because God knows all. He wouldn't just allow, one or two of these things to exist. If he wanted them to be totally wiped out, he could. He's God. Made perfect sense to me. And then he wanted to talk about what Kirk saw when it was in that shape of the crucifix. And when I say it was chained and somehow levitating, so I don't know if the chains were tight and holding it up in the air by its arms and its legs being chained as well. But it almost in and of itself, the way he described it is just not something that is possible with gravity and such. But, once again, we are talking about a deep underground base that there were reptilians and greys and other kind of Pleiadian Nordic like angels in this. So I guess the rules of gravity and our science doesn't apply when it comes to these things. Obviously, they're using portals to travel great distances and such. So he wanted to kind of kick around the idea of that actually being an angel and it not being a angel like Brad had seen, but instead maybe it was an angel like the ones that fell from heaven, one of the 200. Supposedly there's something like 1 to 3 underneath the Euphrates chained. Maybe there's more than what we know, maybe these things didn't get totally wiped out either. And he thinks that quite possibly that is what he saw, and that is why all rules didn't apply with gravity, and how it would just be unimaginable for it to be in that kind of suspension. So, which made a lot of sense to me. And then to have the two Nephilim be right there, right next door in this large kind of white room. I mean, we're talking white halls, white rooms, very brightly lit, almost a glowing brightness. So he really wanted to kind of touch on that and say, hey, I really think that is what he saw down there. And quite possibly that angel is the creator of those two Nephilim, and that's why they are room to room. Or maybe it's not even the case. He just wanted to toss that out, but he really honestly thinks that was not an angel like Brad saw, because there would be almost no way possible for an archangel to be captured by one of these Pleiadian Nordic gray reptilians. It just wouldn't be possible. Which I agreed with him 100%. I was like, yeah, it makes a lot of sense, bud. I didn't say bud, I said father, obviously. So then he wanted to talk a little bit about what his parishioner had happened to him and his parishioner's experience. I guess this gentleman had held on to it until he met Father, and that's how I have to refer to him, because he still is an active priest. He has his own congregation in Colorado, and he does not want anyone to know that what he experienced, because it would kind of go against all of the teachings, and almost kind of be blasphemous, he said. So he wanted to wait and find out if he had permission to share. He let him know who I was, what the channel is about, and that he feels comfortable enough to share his own experience with me, that, I didn't break his anonymity, that I wouldn't break his. So his parishioner lived in California in the 90s, up in the Humboldt region of Northern California, the Emerald Triangle area. He had been involved in a religious sect or cult, where the followers were kind of just led to believe that there were angels and demons amongst the humans, and that there were just certain things that they had to do to avoid contact with both, because both could be detrimental to their lives, I guess. He really didn't want to get into too much in depth on that. But there had been a bunch of these kind of houses or cabins. I guess what these people had done, had bought an old summer camp up in that region. And there were about 15 little cabins. And per cabin, there was about 5 people, 5 members of this organization. And they would practice and do all of their business. I don't want to get too in depth on what he shared, because he asked me not to go too deep with it, and he didn't get that deep with it. But there's, I can't really say too much on YouTube either. So they end up believing that these demons and angels walk amongst them. And supposedly they are led to believe that there are demons all throughout these woods that surround this little old summer camp. And then the angels will come down periodically and balance the good and evil out. So at one point, they are hanging out, doing their whatever. It's nighttime, and chores had gotten done. He had gone into his cabin, and I guess men were with men and women were with women, and that's how it was broken up. Even if you had a girlfriend or wife, they lived apart. There were no children on the premises. If there were families that had children, they were not at this location. There was another location for them, which was actually in not so remote or deep in the woods. Their living arrangements were more city, I guess. So he had finished with his chores for the night and went to his camp or cabin, had gotten ready to go to bed, and there was a huge thud on the roof of his cabin. 4 of the other guys that lived in this cabin with him, they all started to get in a panic, because they either thought that it was a demon had jumped onto the roof or an angel had landed on the roof. They didn't know what to do. This is pre-cell phone, so they can't call anybody. They didn't want to leave their cabin either, out of fear of it being a demon or an angel, which I don't know why they were afraid of angels. That was kind of weird. So I guess the night had gone. It had just kept, getting worse and worse. There was more noise outside of this cabin, and, thuds, scratches, and they could hear growling and such. So they had secured the doors, and there were like 3 windows in this cabin. There was one in the bathroom, and 2 in this kind of kitchen living room area. It was an open cabin. There were no rooms except the bathroom. And the bathroom only contained a urinal. So there was no showers in this cabin. So they are secured in this wooden cabin, but they keep hearing all of this ruckus and racket outside. Eventually, the noise kind of dies down, and they end up going to bed. It is very close to daybreak by then. So anyone in the cabin that night had gotten very little sleep. They wake up the next morning to go and do their chores and then do their practices or whatever. And they notify who is in charge of this camp, this area. And they say, we were visited last night by this or this. But when they had gotten out of their cabin, they looked around and they did a perimeter of their cabin. And on the back side of the cabin where the woods were, there were huge gash marks, like claw marks, all in these like logs, just carved like something had gone to town on this back wall. And immediately at that point, they are thinking demon. He had been led to believe that, that's all there were in these woods, after he had escaped and he didn't really escape. It wasn't like, the Koresh or whatever, but they messed him up enough to where he had become an alcoholic for quite some time until he had found Jesus. They are then told that they were marked by these demons. These demons had marked you. They were segregated from the rest of the group. So they weren't allowed to participate in any of the goings on, but they still had to do their chores, their basic chores to keep this camp running. But afterward, they were shunned. They weren't allowed to talk to anybody except the one person in charge. So then they are brought their food. There was a communal dining hall area where they all ate together. They were not allowed to go there. So their food was brought to them by other members and the leader of this area. He was not the main leader of the group. He just took orders and ran this camp area. Night obviously quickly comes again, and they hear noise on the back wall once again, growling, pounding, and they barricade themselves in. And then they hear underneath the cabin on the floorboards scratching, but loud, like something is trying to claw its way into the cabin from the bottom of the floor up. They're now freaked out and not knowing what to do. They've been shunned and they're in the middle of, this deep wooded area at an old summer camp that, was falling apart in just a real pile of crap area, just basically it was like a 60-year-old summer camp that was in need of major repair and overhaul. And that's what these people were doing periodically, but they didn't have the know-how to do any of it. They didn't have the right skills. They didn't have the right material to, bring this summer camp back to its glory. They're just pretty much living in shambles. All night they hear this major commotion underneath, out on the sides, but for some reason, whatever is doing this is not at the front of the cabin. Now, the cabins were all facing each other, but there was a huge opening, like open area. So all the cabins faced each other, but there was a great distance between. The communal dining hall was all the way at the end. But whatever it was, and they had noticed this the second night, they were like, why isn't it going to the front of the cabin? It just seems to be below us and on the back side of us. But that first night it hit the roof. So what do you think is going on? Why wouldn't it, if it was a demon and it wanted to get us, it would come any way it wanted to, and it would be able to rip through the floorboards, the walls. And so at that point, a few of the guys in the cabin are like, it can't be. It's got to be, maybe it's a bear, maybe it's a wild animal. And the next night, so on and so forth. It goes on for a couple of days, and they are shunned. They are not allowed to ask anybody if it's happening to them as well, but they notice that it's not. They notice that no one else except this cabin has been targeted. The cabin where it sits is the furthest into the woods. It's not the last cabin of that side, but it's the furthest in the woods back. So almost like a oval. So it's sitting further back than any of the rest, even the one next to it, but they are still up a ways. The next night, they decide that they want to see what this is. They decide that day that, they made kind of like a decision, let's get some weapons, large clubs, some sticks. We'll sharpen them throughout the day. At least we'll have some sort of protection, which was against the rules of their little organization. And I say organization because the word is looked down upon on YouTube. They hear the commotion once again, and it doesn't happen to the back side of the wall. It happens again at the floorboards. And as they are standing and they've kind of pinpointed where the noise is coming from exactly, and they're standing above it, waiting for whatever this is to come through. One of the guys takes his large stick and kind of bangs it on the floor, and there's an instant growl and what he described as almost a wolf-like howl, like right under their cabin. They all kind of freak out, and they're like, that can't be a wolf, it can't be a dog, because what dog lays on its back and claws upward? But it just sounded like a wolf. So they all, after that howl, they can hear it get out from or crawling underneath the cabin, and they run to the back window, which would be in the bathroom, because the kitchen window in the bedroom, living room area, mind you, it's once again an open cabin, open framed area with just a little bathroom. So they run to this back window in the bathroom, and they're waiting to see whatever comes out from underneath, hoping that they will be able to, because this bathroom's kind of in the corner of this building. And it takes a little bit, but they see, as their eyes are starting to adjust, they see what can only be described as, back in the 90s, a werewolf. Silver bullet, just this large canine-like creature, large tail, bushy tail. It's jet black. And one of the guys gets the brilliant idea of tapping on the wall as it's making its way into the woods. It's not running, it's just walking into the woods. It turns and looks at that window, and he told Father that its eyes looked like coals from a fire. There's this reddish orange color, like hellfire. As it turned and it looked at that window, it must have seen one or two, if not all, of the guys staring out the window at this thing. It turned around and ran full force towards that window, toward that wall. And as it did, it jumped and landed on the roof right above the window. And they could hear it. They're all looking up like, is it going to come from up now down to us? What's going on? As they're looking up, they hear a growl, and he turns his head, and he sees he is, 4 feet away from this face, and the only divide between them is a cheap piece of glass from like the 1950s or 60s, and it's staring at him upside down, as it's obviously lying on the roof peak, or not peak but slant, looking down at them. And he's face to face, and he sees intelligence. He sees a monster, but as it's looking at him, and he's too scared to scream, the guys are still looking up, and he nudges one of the guys, and the other guy turns and looks, and he lets out the scream. And not the gentleman, not the parishioner, but another member of this organization lets out this loud scream. And when he does that, what he saw was this Dogman smile, like its teeth, just like a German Shepherd or a husky, when they get excited, they curl their lip, and it's what they call a dog smile. Obviously, I'm sure many of you, if not all, know what I'm talking about. with these hellfired eyes and this malicious smile. And it smashes its face onto the window. Like, and the glass shatters and its head is now in the window. It drops off the roof. As it does, it pulls its head back out. It lands bipedal. So it was like a circus act, it just flipped. And it's now staring at these guys. There is no glass separating it, but its head could fit through the window, but there's no way its shoulders were going to fit through the window. It's got its head inside this small cabin. It's growling. It's snapping. And they run out of the bathroom and shut the door. They don't realize that. He realizes after the fact that there was no way this thing would have been able to fit through that window. It was a very small window. But fear is a huge thing to where you're not thinking rationally. So they slam the door, barricade it, and they can hear it growling, and then nothing, just dead silence. As they're now trying to figure out what to do, a few of them start looking at that window. One of the guys opens the front door and screams, "Help, help, help, help." And no one comes because they're shunned. The only thing they are there for now is for free labor. There's been no discussion of what is going to happen. And they're not shunned because they did anything wrong. They're shunned because this creature targeted their cabin. He's screaming, "Help, help us." And he hears a growl. And the guy, the parishioner, comes running to pull him in, to shut the door because he knows that no one's coming. He's already been told, get him. He goes to grab him and he looks down because he can hear a growl. And looking up from underneath the cabin, underneath these stairs, is that face that they just saw. He slams the door. They're now secured. They've got their sticks, sharpened sticks, spears, whatever you want to call them, clubs. And they're all now sitting against the doors, waiting for either that thing to come through the window or wall or daybreak. They somehow fall asleep. They end up falling asleep, all of these guys, and they wake up in the morning and there's a knock. They assume it's, breakfast because once again, they can't eat with the rest of the organization. And it's the leader of the group. So the leader comes into the cabin. He sees that everybody is visibly shaken. The bathroom door is closed. He starts to question everybody. Did you hear anything last night? Who was the one screaming last night? What did you see? And they lead him to the bathroom. And they show him the window is smashed out. He immediately starts to cast blame on everybody in the cabin. And one of the guys who left when he left when the parishioner left, because right at this point he was really starting to see through everything. For like a year he had been doing this. It was good. It wasn't, being shunned, for no reason. he had witnessed different kinds of bullshit going on, but it wasn't happening to him, so he didn't pay any mind to it. But now that it's happening to him and a fellow member, they're both at their point, and one of the guys says, it smashed through the window. What are you talking about? We screamed for help. We needed your help last night. If you helped us last night, maybe you could have seen what we saw. And he then states that last night, at around sometime after that scream for help, they are now missing a female and a male of this organization that worked in the kitchen dining area. They did the cleanup and preparation for food for the next day. But there had been some talk that these two had a connection. Mind you, women lived with women, men lived with men. The gentleman that is now missing is in the cabin next to theirs. And so now they're being questioned like they had some part of these two people disappearing. And they're like, we had no, it was trying to smash through our window. It was here. The demon was here. One of the faithful guys, one of the faithful members is trying to rationalize with the person in charge, this demon was trying to come in and get us and tempt us and this and that. And that's why we yelled for help. And it was the guy that was yelling for help that is now talking to the leader of this group. And he tells everybody that, we are missing two people. There is what looked to be a struggle on the opposite side of the cabin next to you. And alls we found was a shoe and some ripped clothing with blood on it. Did you guys do this? No, we didn't. It was what we saw. And he states up, the parishioner speaks up and says, we need to call the police then. If there are two missing people and you found their shoe and blood and clothing, don't you think that we should call the police? He himself is then escorted out of that cabin and brought to the leader's cabin, where he is interrogated, made to feel like he was part of the disappearance, and if they did call the police, that they and all the rest of the members would say, you did something to these people and you would be the one in trouble. We don't communicate with law enforcement or outside people from our organization. He then is told to go back to his cabin, where they are now trying to board up that back window. They can't put any new glass in it. Once again, they are not skilled laborers, not skilled carpenters, and they don't have the supplies they don't have another piece of glass. They don't have this, they don't have that, but they do have planked wood, so they board up the bathroom window. The night after this night goes smooth, and it is the sixth night where everything goes smooth. There is not any noise. There is nothing. The seventh night was his last stay with this organization after a year of being with them, and the other fella who was also speaking up and being not aggressive, but hey, we didn't do this. Why didn't you guys come? the other guy that was, part of the group, everyone's good except these two. And they decide that they're going to leave, but they are going to wait until night. And they're going to tell everybody in their cabin that, we decided to leave. We are not supposed to leave. Apparently there's a big kind of whatever. If you wanted to leave this organization, there was a whole list of hoops that you needed to jump through and pretty much buy your way out of it. They wait until nighttime where they know no one is going to check on them. Nobody is paying attention to this cabin, and they walk out of the cabin, out that door, and head out this long trail that will bring them to a main road. It's about a 3-mile hike, maybe even more. They get out onto this main road, or not main road, but the kind of fire road that leads to the main road. They can hear the 3 remaining people in that cabin yelling for help, stating his name and the other guy's name that they just left. We need to get them back here, this and that. They start running down this fire road. And as they are running, they hear something paralleling them in the woods. And they're running, and they look over and they see these orange eyes. And they know exactly what this is. They don't know that it's a Dogman, but they know that this is the creature or demon that they had seen the night before that tried to smash through their bathroom window. They end up running the distance and getting to the main road. And as they get to the main road, this creature comes off from the woods and onto the fire road behind them. They instantly can hear the growl. They turn and look, and it's right there. They decide to start running down the main road, and as they're running, a car is coming opposite direction of them, and the Dogman is in the road behind them, walking. It's not running after them. He told the father that it was walking. And for the longest period of time, while he drank and was not part of this organization, but for the longest period of time, he did believe that it was a demon. So he's drinking, and trying to cope with everything that he had been through for the years that he was with this organization. He had been at this summer camp for a year prior to all this happening, but then he had been a member of the organization for a year or two prior to this area where he was staying. The car stops and starts honking its horn, and it's an old man who's probably 60-something years old, and he yells out the window, "Get your blanket asses in my car. What the is that behind you?" And they get in the car, and the old guy just starts driving towards the Dogman that is in front of them. And he distinctly, the guy that was telling this to the father said, the old man said, "It's one of those goddamn Bigfoots. Let's hit the damn thing." And he doesn't get anywhere close to hitting it, but it jumps off into the woods, and they could see it running through the woods for a brief second. They then are brought to the old man's home as they're telling the old guy what had happened, who they were. he had said, oh, you're one of the, you guys are those weirdos that are out in the woods, this and that. The town is a little remote community, knew of these people living in the woods. They're allowed to stay that night at the old man's house, and he brings them to a bus station a couple towns away. And then that's the last time he ever was in that region of California. He ends up meeting his wife years later, like a couple years later, and she's from Colorado, and that's how he ends up moving to Colorado. But during this period of time, until he turns his life over to Christ, he is an alcoholic, trying to cope with the years of being a member of this cult and the couple of nights that he faced with a Dogman. When he shared his experience with the Father, he told him that he had seen a demon, and he described everything that he had seen. And the Father said, what you saw was not a demon. It was not a demon because of your mistakes and your choices. What you saw was a creature called the Dogman. And quite possibly it was drawn to your camp because of the isolation. Maybe it felt and honed in on the fear that you guys had of the main people who were in charge of this or whatnot. But what you saw was a Dogman. It was not a demon. It was not your fault. And this poor guy was an alcoholic for years because he had seen this Dogman. So then he shares with the priest. The priest tells him everything that he knows, this what I just shared. But what Father got out of the deal was, what if these things are demonic? Or are offspring of the Nephilim? And he said, Jeff, I've heard you talk about your addiction issues and being sober for 9 years. And then talking about how people that you have spoken with, a majority of them have had addiction issues, have had kind of alcoholism, have had mental health issues. And it seems like these creatures are attracted to that and show themselves to us, the people that have had addiction issues and stuff. And that's not necessarily, do I believe 100% that everybody has had any kind of experience with one of these creatures, is an addict, or has mental health issues. No. I'm just saying, out of the majority of people that I've talked to and looking at these attacks like Tony Aarons, Amber Miller, minus Dr. Nancy Shaw and Brenda Hamilton, but the majority of these cases, people, the investigators and the chiefs all say to the media, like Tony Aarons, meth was a contributing factor of him being torn apart by a creature. That's not true at all, but it's what they say to keep the view off of what really happened to this guy. Oh, he was just a meth head. Pfft, cares? It's no big loss. It's a meth head. But it seems like, all of these cases in West Virginia, Tennessee, the 5-state hotspot, the Appalachia region, all have a very poor area, great people, amazing people. I can tell you that since doing this channel for the years that I've been doing it, some of the nicest folk that I have met are from West Virginia, North Carolina, the just down home people, Appalachian folk. But because of the poverty, there's so much depression, there's so much addiction. So here's where he says, quite possibly these things are attracted to that. And the reason being is, not only did the angels that fell from heaven create the Nephilim by having relations with the daughters of man, but they also did DNA genetic manipulation and created these creatures, which technically could be Nephilim. And if they are demonic or have this evil to them, they would be attracted to the negative rather than the positive. And he wanted to share, that one experience with me, because it really does show the fact that, this area, this cult, is ignoring our Savior, ignoring the good, and doing the bad, and you can't tell me that all these people that are separated, women on one side, men on the other, and, there's not depression there. So that's probably why that creature was attracted to that house right there, or cabin. So Father really thinks that not only are these creatures supposed, people have seen and heard tales of dog-headed alien-like creatures, Sumerian texts, this and that, Anunnaki. But what if these things were created by the fallen angels, and then after the Great Flood and all of that is when people start seeing these creatures, like Marco Polo, Alexander the Great, this and that. And then as time progresses, we have more and more. And these things are attracted to the negative. And I was blown away. I was like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. And that poor man having to go through all of that, he was depressed. Obviously, he was depressed because he, even though he had met his future wife and then moved to Colorado following her, he drowned his feelings and emotions in alcohol. So it makes a lot of freaking sense to me. There is quite possibly a spiritual war going on. And what if these reptilians are demons, not aliens? What if they're coming from a dimension that could be called hell? Fiery hell zone, but it's another dimension. I don't know. He truly believes that, there is a holy war going on, a spiritual war, and that these creatures are targeting not the weak, but ones who are not strong with God. And, who am I to say, well, I had my experience. I know I wasn't strong with God at that point, but, I've heard of people having experiences and using the name of Christ to try and drive these creatures away. And sometimes that works, but there's been times that I've heard that it didn't work. It makes sense. It really does. And coming from a Catholic priest, that technically, I guess, would be called blasphemy. And that's another reason why he wanted to stay anonymous. So With that, I'd like to thank you all for supporting this channel. It is your support that keeps this channel growing and going, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences, theories, judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect we deserve. Please, everyone, stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real. They are out there and dangerous. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless you all.